On tonight's show, we'll be talking all things PSHE, how it fits into the curriculum, the positive, the challenges, and of course the negatives as well. And key question, if it gets any recognition that it actually deserves. All this to come and more on the Twilight Show with me, Ben Thomas. Right. Well, we are 4 days out, 3 days out from half term, and this time of year it feels like we are absolutely desperate for holiday. Or I feel like I'm desperate for holiday anyway. I'm confined to my garage tonight. Last time I did this, I was at my colleague Louisa's house, and we had a cat that was or she had a cat rather that was roaming around. And this time I'm right next to our guinea pigs, who are happily munching away on some strawberries. So if you hear really random squeaks and noises, it's not me. It's not my guest, who I'm going to introduce very, very quickly now. It's the guinea pigs. So yeah, I'm with a blanket and I'm freezing cold on our settee because it's bath time in our house. So I didn't think you'd want to be exposed to that one. Hope you're all doing okay on this Tuesday in February anyway. Fran is literally right here, so I'm going to get her in. I hope I'm going to get her in anyway.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, Fran. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. Yes, thank you for having me tonight.
Absolute pleasure, no problem at all. So we're going to talk all about PSHE, and kind of full disclaimer, I was trying to be really, really clever with the show title by calling it Problem Child and that kind of stuff. But really, from my point of view, PSHE is kind of a huge part of certainly what I do in my day as a PSHE lead. We're going to talk a little bit about what you do in a minute, Fran. But in terms of the kind of the makeup of the show, we're going to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it really, and just kind of focus on what the curriculum says, how we feel as kind of leaders, because we're both leaders in that field, how we feel about kind of delivering that to our children and staff, and ultimately kind of where it stands in the curriculum, because we can talk about maths, we can talk about literacy, we can talk about science, all those core subjects. But for me, PSHE is rapidly becoming a huge part of what every practitioner in whether it's primary school or secondary school really. So Fran, I'm going to literally throw the metaphorical ball over to you and let you introduce yourself fully to the show.
Okay, well, thank you. And I completely agree with you with PSHE. I lead PSHE in my school currently. I'm a big lover of PSHE. I thoroughly enjoy teaching it. But it's not kind of always what I've done. So I kind of started teaching about, I think it was like nearly 10 years ago now. I started teaching in a middle school over in Staffordshire, so it's one of those areas where they still have a middle school system, and I taught mainly year 6, 7, and 8, and I was trying to reflect earlier. Actually, I don't think I taught much PSHE when I started teaching. I think it was one of those that, it was covered in assemblies, you'd have the odd sessions, certain things would come up, and that would be kind of how historically PSHE was taught. I then relocated. I moved to the southeast. And taught year 6 again at a junior school, and I actually led maths. So kind of my other passion is maths. I love teaching maths. I led maths there. It was also the DSL there at my school. And yeah, just that again, feel reflecting on my practice there, and that probably wasn't even too long ago. PSHE was in play. We were teaching it. We had our slot once a week. We relied quite heavily on a scheme, and that was something that I feel that actually people did rely quite heavily on it, and again we were kind of guided to follow that scheme as much as we can. And then I nearly 4 years ago now, I think it is, I moved to my current school. So I work in an independent school.
Fran, you shocked me. I didn't know that before.
I know. I work at an independent school. myself, so I still teach year 6. I lead, so I'm assistant head pastoral there. When I started there, I actually did. I was class teacher there for a little bit. I then took on the head of maths role there. I've kind of always as well kind of looked after and guided ECTs, NQTs, PGCE students. And again, that's always, I've always kind of been a big fan of that, because actually I found that since I've done that, I've reflected on my practice as a teacher quite a lot. And but yeah, going back to my current role, so I've been in my role just over a year now. My kind of pastoral role, well, it's one of those jobs that kind of fills lots and lots of different, it covers lots of different areas. But yeah, PSHE is one of them. And yeah, so I thoroughly enjoy it. We've kind of had a really big push on PSHE in the last 2 years, year and a bit. And yeah, it's going really, really well. And like yourself, I'm a lover of PSHE. I think it's something that I think lots of people have been on a journey with. So I know kind of when I started at my current school, we were given it a 30-minute slot, whereas now we've kind of made sure that there is there is kind of more designated time to teach PSHE, because it is so important. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me.
I think that's really important, actually. I think it's I did this with my last guest, who unfortunately for her works with me day in, day out. And I think it's really important to kind of, when people listen to the show, to kind of work out who they're listening to, first of all, and kind of where, not so much the agenda, but kind of how the thoughts and feelings are coming in, really. And it's interesting because obviously you mentioned you've been teaching for 10 years. And I always lose a year, but I think I'm in my 15th year now, as in terms of academic year anyway. And I remember when I started, fantastic school, really good grounding for me, 3 form entry, started there as an NQT. And I remember PSHE literally consisting of circle time. And we're not talking, a million years ago. We're talking sort of fairly recent history, or I'd like to think fairly recent history. And, we do circle time. We do that classic horror show, and people listening now will cringe at this. But we did the whole, how was your weekend? Like the news books and all that sort of stuff. The stuff that I used to do at primary school. And it's moved on so rapidly. And we're going to kind of unpick, some of the reasons why we think it's moved on a bit. But I think really, the evolution that I've seen, and I'm sure other practitioners listening to this have seen as well, is that you go from the kind of, well, just ask them how they're feeling. What's your best thing in life? If you were an animal, what would you be? All that kind of stuff. And then it kind of moved on to to like jigsaw. We had jigsaw for a long time, and I know when I first saw that just blew my mind. And the kind of the school that I work at now, as great as jigsaw is or was back then, I haven't seen it for a couple of years in terms of any add-ons. It just didn't fit kind of what our pupils needed and what our cohorts needed. And I suppose that leads me really to the first question, the real nuts and bolts of what we're talking about, Fran. Is teaching PSHE tough? Is it difficult?
Well, I definitely say it can be. It's interesting actually, because I did a kind of, I called it a pastoral review with my my staff. So how PSHE works in my school. So a little bit about my school is I just teach boys. We do have a girls side to the school as well, and we also have a senior and a sixth form side and a nursery. So there's a lot of us, but my focus is on the boys. And like I said, I currently teach year 6, and we are at the moment, our PSHE is taught by our form tutors. So we're really lucky, actually. We do have subject specialists, and so over the years, different people have been form tutors, but our form tutors are kind of the main teacher that our boys see throughout the day, our boys and girls see throughout the day. They teach maths, English, and PSHE. And we've been, like I say, when I first started that, it was a little bit different, that different people with different subjects were teaching the children a little bit like it would be at secondary, basically. Mm-hmm. And so now all our PSHE is taught by the form tutor. And I think we've got a really, really, really good team that teach PSHE. I think everybody that I work with do see the importance of it. We've done kind of a lot of talking about it in insets, talking about it in staff meetings, and I do think that our staff now do kind of really understand, especially kind of post-COVID, how important PSHE is. So yeah, at the end of last year, I did ask staff to fill in a form actually about pastoral, and there were lots of things in there. PSHE was one of them, and actually our staff do feel quite confident teaching PSHE. That was something, it was a completely unanimous kind of, you can fill in, tell me what you think. So on a whole, our staff, 86% said that they were confident in teaching PSHE. However, then when it came to RSE, people weren't as confident. That was 73%. And so I do think there's still that's kind of that. I think people see the importance of it. I love teaching PSHE. I just find it, and actually the children that I teach, on a whole, love PSHE. When it's PSHE time, they're like yay. So it's so I do think we've kind of got to that really, really good that really kind of good point with PSHE. I do think that actually, and this is something kind of in my role, I've been looking at quite a lot. We are in a challenging world, and it can change very, very quickly. So we're one of those schools that actually we do follow a scheme. We do actually use Jigsaw, but we don't follow it religiously. So I quite like Jigsaw and using a scheme for things like RSE. I think that is something that I think it can really kind of support, guide teachers in what they should not be saying to certain year groups. But actually something that we've found, we started using this actually it was probably around October time actually. I was doing a little bit of research, and again, just teaching boys. We've been kind of doing a lot of research about kind of working with boys, and I came across something called Being Mankind. And this all kind of links up with this kind of misogyny, and it's kind of linked in with obviously all the stuff in the media linked to Andrew Tate. So again, I think it's that keeping up with what is going on in all the children's lives, and that is something that we do have a scheme, but teachers are more than welcome to kind of go off scheme if they think that fits for their class. And it might be that one class. So we're at my school are currently we my year group are 3 formentary. But we do have 2 formentary, 1 formentary. So it's completely, we have a lot of trust in our teachers to make those choices. That we always say that they are the people that know our children really, really well, and that they should be, if they think that something needs to be taught, or they need to go over something, that they can make that choice. We trust them in that. But yeah, I think it can be tough, and I do think one of the biggest challenges is keeping up with what is going on in everyday life. And it's one of those that with the whole, I've been doing kind of a lot of reading around Andrew Tate and the misogyny and that kind of aspect of what's going on, like with the media, and actually the stuff that we were covering with our Being Mankind topic, which kind of we look at things like gender stereotypes. We look a lot at mental health. We encourage looking at lots of different types of positive role models, because again, something that I find with the boys that I teach, a lot of them have role models, but they tend to be footballers, and I think it's introducing them, exposing them to different types of people, different role models, and getting them to know about the different people out there. It's not just footballers, for example.
I think it's interesting, because I had funny you mentioned that news. I mean, obviously a little bit and not trying to plug other shows here, but we have actually got a show on Andrew Tate which came out recently. So if you want to have a bit more of a deep dive into that, I sound like an Ofsted inspector. If you want to go off on a tangent a little bit more and kind of focus a bit more on kind of Andrew Tate and the things that he says, and we'll probably leave it there, then you're more than welcome to go through our back catalogue and find that one. It's interesting, you mentioned about the media, because I had a mentor quite a few years back, and he said the best PSHE CPD that you're ever going to get is to read a paper. And at the time, I just thought, you're bonkers. You're absolutely bonkers. What are you talking about? But the more we can talk. We could do a whole separate show on the impact of the pandemic and COVID and everything else. And I'm sure there probably is one in our back catalogue. But the way that children react to modern culture, popular culture, things that are going on is quite incredible, really. And I had a question here, and when I sent you the very loose agenda, which we've probably already gone off on a tangent already for. But, one of the key things I'm interested in, and when I do learning walks as a PSHE, or when I go and talk to kids mainly, I don't really do learning walks because I kind of know what's going on already. The kids are the key in terms of telling me what's going on. How they're reacting to what we're teaching them. And, you made the point about you guys using Jigsaw, and it's very good for certain schools and certain demographics. Certainly the RSE element of Jigsaw is very, very good. But, how they react to what we're teaching them, and then the kind of things that come out of that, not in the lesson, but, a day, 2 days, 2 weeks later, potentially is kind of the key. And I think for PSHE teaching or practice that I've ever seen, is to obviously have a love for it, because that's what any great teacher does, but also to react in a positive way and kind of be prepared for some of the reactions that come out. When I was kind of looking through and did a bit of a chat with our pupils last week, actually, on PSHE, the stuff that they were talking about, was to do with economic worries. They were doing a bit of a lesson on kind of money and budgeting and things like that. There was a bit of science in there in terms of biology, and particularly for the year sixes, how regularly they wash and how they keep up their personal hygiene, but also kind of really focusing in on the kind of the mental health aspect. And it's very easy for certain schools and curriculum programs to kind of pay lip service, but actually what we do as teachers in the classroom and work in schools day to day, whether that's independent, private, whether that's state schools, whatever it is at any age level, we're kind of by osmosis, we're just looking at PSHE all the time. And so I guess really it's thinking about your current pupils and the people you've taught sort of previously, how do you feel that students kind of react to what's being delivered to them in the curriculum? Do you see kind of positive strands coming out? Do you see them maybe making kind of subtle changes to the way that they present themselves, both kind of physically and emotionally, potentially? Do you kind of see a positive reaction from what you're doing in your school based on kind of what you're teaching them?
Definitely. I think we've had it. I mean, obviously this week's Children's Mental can't get my words out there. Children's Mental Health Week, and we've there's a lot. We put a lot into that, actually, and you can see the children using those techniques that you come up with, or those kind of, when you're talking about things linked to resilience, self-esteem, and their mental health. It definitely is having a positive impact, and I think these. I think with good PSHE teaching from the right person, then I think it can definitely lead to better academic success. So I definitely think that kind of we're getting kind of more social, emotional kind of issues, in a sense, that are coming through, and that actually good PSHE teaching it's almost like that kind of mini intervention before kind of other intervention is needed. And actually I'm definitely seeing from our PSHE teaching this happening. And it's interesting, actually, talking to parents. We had a parents' evening last week, and just some of the things that they're saying that their boys are coming home and saying. So from our Being Mankind work that we've been talking about, they are actually taken more of an interest themselves. It's something that they find quite relevant, and definitely, like you said about the kind of talking about economic worries and things like that. It's something that they're hearing, their children are hearing in the news all the time, and actually they are reacting really, really positively to it, and that's to the teaching, because they're taking on board the things that we're talking about with them, and they. And actually, I think them having that, something that I think is really important is having that kind of open forum, and that's something where they feel that they can ask questions, and they can talk to you, and they can give your feedback. That's something that I think is really important as well.
I mean, with the boys that you teach, do you? I mean, it may or may not be in the curriculum documents that you have, but do you make them kind of explicitly aware of the kind of the narrative around, boys and kind of men and males in general, really talking about how they feel? And do you kind of bring up? I guess it obviously depends on the ages that you've got there, but do you bring up the kind of the kind of more serious elements of men's mental health with them, or is it something that you kind of, I say, skirt around in the nicest possible way, but is it something that you focus on with the boys in order for them to kind of reflect on their own behaviours, their own feelings, and their kind of own emotions?
Definitely, yeah. That it is definitely something that we have, and I'd say in the last year we have tried to do that a little bit more. So we were talking, one of the sessions that we did recently was called Big Boys Do Cry, and actually talking about asking the boys kind of, have they ever been told to man up before, for example. And they, I think they all probably said that they had, on reflection of that. And actually, we spoke about kind of how we spoke a lot. They had so many questions kind of when we did that session, and we spoke a lot about how different generations of people who may have said those things to them. So yeah, we have been quite explicit with our teaching around kind of men's mental health and those types of things. So, and like I say, I think it has been really positive, and what they have kind of, how I see them behave and how I see them act is definitely positive as well.
I mean, it's interesting as well, isn't it? Because we hear a lot of narrative around, kids need really good male start again, I'm doing what you did, male role models. But I always laugh at that, because I think, well, they need good female role models. They just need good, it doesn't matter whether they're male, female, whatever, they need good role models, full stop. And
Definitely.
People are going to be able to talk to them about how they feel, and kind of coach them, and not necessarily teach them, but give them the space to be able to say, I'm annoyed because of XYZ, or this, I did this and it made me feel really good, but I can't explain why, kind of stuff. It's it is so important. And I think there is a danger that we, talking generally about PSHE and teaching in general, is that we put a lot of pressure, a lot of mental load on teachers anyway, but asking them to deliver sessions on mental health when actually their mental health might not be good themselves. And kind of having that passion to go, look, do you know what, everyone feels a certain way at a certain point, all feelings are welcome, let's kind of work through them, and kind of giving them the tools to be able to focus on their emotions and their feelings, and be able to kind of work through those, really. And it's interesting, you mentioned the phrase man up, which is possibly one of the worst phrases that's ever been created, and I honestly don't know where it came from, because I'm, what am I, 37? I don't look it, I know, but it's one of those where I don't ever remember being told to man up as a kid growing up. So I don't know kind of where it became normal or accepted to kind of use those phrases. The other thing I was going to talk to you about really is in terms of your curriculum. We kind of touched a little bit upon, kind of mental health and discussing emotions. Do you deal at all with any kind of body image issues or statements or concerns from the boys within your kind of PSHE curriculum, or is that something that will come later on potentially? I'm just kind of interested, because we spend a long time in education and kind of the media in general, talking about how women are perceived. But there's a kind of a growing, not trend, but a growing kind of discussion around how men and young boys kind of see their own bodies as well. Is that something that's kind of your path at all?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there is actually, it's kind of, if you're looking at the jigsaw scheme, for example, that does come up. I think it tends to be kind of when you start the RSE. But it is, we actually, I can remember doing an activity last year. So I've actually really enjoyed it. I actually taught the same class I've got this year last year when they were in year 5. And so we did an activity where we looked at we looked at how a kind of a female had been on a magazine cover being edited, but then actually when we were looking into it, the other teacher that I was working with, we actually found so many examples of how that had also happened with men as well. So we'd found like lots of examples of Harry Styles, for example, with his he had acne, and in the magazine it had been airbrushed off, and we found so many examples. And in my head I thought, it was just female celebrities, it was just girls, and on the magazines with girls. But actually, when we looked into it, we found lots of examples of Justin Bieber, Harry Styles, and people that actually different kind of footballers. So it's definitely something that I think we have spoken about. It does come up. I would say I haven't really heard kind of body image. I don't, if I'm reflecting on when I've taught girls before, I don't really hear as many comments. I don't know if that maybe it's something that when they get older, but it is definitely something that we've touched on and we've spoken about with the boys. So yeah, it is, but it definitely has come up.
Do you think there's enough guidance in the curriculum documents from our friends and supportive colleagues at the DFE? Do you think there's enough within the national curriculum for, let's say an NQT who's coming into primary school, let's say year 4, for example, just to be really specific? Do you feel like there's enough in there for them to be able to competently and accurately teach the demands of the PSHE curriculum?
Definitely not. It's something that I've looked at recently, actually, and I think I've always been lucky in a sense that I've worked at a school that uses a scheme, and it's so. But yeah, looking at what if you aren't using a scheme, and like I say, I think definitely as you become a more confident teacher, and actually, like I say, when reflecting on when I've worked with ECTs, NQTs, PGC students, you do just, when you've taught it and you've done it and you've practiced it, and you do reflect, and you do feel more confident in changing what you're doing and actually going out and planning and doing your own thing. But actually, yeah, like as an ECT, it is definitely something that I don't think there is enough information out there. And that if you're in a smaller state school that maybe can't, that you don't have the funds to buy into a scheme at first, I do definitely think that is that there isn't really enough out there. And I do think, and I know this from my own practice, that over the years, I have felt more confident teaching PSHE. So I think definitely kind of my big thing is that there should be that kind of that person at your school that does champion PSHE, that you can go and speak to if you're struggling, or you're unsure on what to teach or kind of what to say. Because sometimes I know I've had this before with staff members saying, especially more when you get to the RSE, saying, I feel a bit uncomfortable, or I don't quite know, but I mean, I've always kind of quite liked teaching PSHE and the RSE, so it's definitely something that, and I always just say to staff, look, if you're unsure on a question, it's fine to say, I'm not sure, I don't know, but I can find that answer out for you. And I think that kind of, that, like I say, that open forum, that honesty, is what's important. But no, I definitely think there needs to be kind of definitely more guidance. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think right. I realised NQTs and you said ECTs, and you're so 2023 because I'm so honestly, like, we have them, and I go, "Oh yeah, NQT," and they go, "What's that?" Just like, all right, yeah, just whatever you are these days, because they've changed it so many times,
Oh
haven't they, over the
no.
last couple of years? Yeah, I mean, I just don't think it's given. I don't think it's given the focus that it needs to be, and I think it's really important that schools and teachers feel that they can, you know, move out of the hour that they've got, just like any other lesson, and not be constrained to, situations where you feel like you've got to get it all done in half an hour or 40 minutes or whatever you're given on your, excessively big timetable. I don't feel like there is enough guidance, and I feel like there's not enough kind of consistent threads across schools. I don't have any kind of massive data to back that up, but I just get a feeling that really it's about, making sure that the students are comfortable with with the material that's being delivered to them, but also that the person delivering it is comfortable. And the point you made about the RSE stuff is absolutely spot on, because there are certain people that you feel like they just don't want to kind of move on, but also the kind of, I suppose, the control freak in me sometimes, if that's, even a thing, wants to keep it consistent. So when you're looking at, year fours, year fives, and year sixes, you want to make sure that actually the messages that are being delivered are the same, and that there isn't any kind of misconceptions with the RSE stuff. But it's very, very difficult to strike that balance at times, and particularly if you've got younger teachers that are like, no way, I'm not touching that with a barge pole sort of stuff. It becomes very difficult to to get that knowledge across to students that might find it difficult, to be honest. I think that's the key thing. But the other thing as well, and we're going to cut to news in a minute, but the thing that makes me laugh about PSHE is that you talk to any DFE affiliate, shall we say, and Ofsted now highly value what's going on in PSHE, but there's no money for it. And I know that we could constantly say there's no money in education anyway, but if you look at the average school's budget and you say, well, they've portioned this amount to maths, they portioned this amount to literacy, you often find that PSHE is so far down the list. And even when people do have money, they're not sure what they should be doing with that money. Maths and literacy becomes quite easy because you can buy resources for that, you can have experiences. But with PSHE, I think people find it very difficult to work out what they should be doing with that money. So I suppose the final question on the first part of the show really is: do you think that there should be? I know the answer is going to be yes, but do you feel like specifically for PSHE there should be money that is ring fenced in the same way that schools are entitled to a grant from the DFE to train one or two teachers in kind of mental health first aiding? Do you feel like there should be some ring fence money for PSHE in schools?
100%, definitely. And I think something where obviously I'm an independent, and where I feel really, really lucky is that we've got there's so many different people that I can go to speak to about things as well. So we've got school nurses, for example, and they're an amazing resource for us. And it's just so nice to have that kind of, that extra expert kind of, to have them kind of guiding as well if you're ever unsure, especially when it becomes like we spoke about kind of like health and those types of things. So it's 100% should. And maybe we're quite lucky as well, is that as we are we are multiple schools all in one, there are different people to speak to. So I will often speak to the pastoral lead that teaches the girls, and also the PSHE lead, and the same thing with our senior boys as well. And we will talk about things, and it's so nice just being able to to actually share kind of our experiences. And I know I speak to my friends that kind of are either still in state or independent, or some that have moved out of education, and we talk about things and talk about themes that come up. And I do think that's really important, because actually when I was maths lead at my last school, I used to be kind of heavily involved with like the maths hubs, and there were so many different meetings around maths, and that's where I feel that my passion came from, but also my practice. And I think just that being able to speak to people, but the emphasis goes on other things. So if it is maths, English, but yeah, really, really important, definitely.
We're going to go to some news now. I think it's going to be about 6 or 7 minutes with you straight after that. A couple of messages from our fantastic sponsors as well. And then we'll be talking about the positives in teaching PSHE, which we sort of touched upon a little bit, and also some of the challenges that are currently facing, practitioners with PSHE across the school spectrum, really. So we'll be right back after the news.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This is Teachers Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
At the National Higher Education Conference, Unison Assistant General Secretary John Richards opened proceedings with a damning critique of the government's approach towards university education, according to Unison's own website. Mr. Richards focused on out-of-touch ministers who fail to understand the current funding crisis, and pointed out that the funding models across the UK seem to be broken. He cited the issue of limited government funding as causing a de facto cap on student numbers, and accused the government of trashing the UK's reputation for higher education in Europe, leading to big drops in the numbers of overseas students. A story covered by Teachers Talk Radio News last week. Mr. Richards went on to assert that those in government do not understand the cost of living crisis because they've never had to face it. Strike action by those working in the HE sector has been part of a wave of action taken by unions across a range of public sectors in recent weeks. The last week saw the release of details of government plans to revamp children's social care in England. BBC News reported on the plan for more early support for families and the extra £200 million funding for the next 2 years. Last year, a review warned that tens of thousands more children could end up in care without additional funding and reform. The plan has faced criticism that many of the changes are being rolled out as localised pilots rather than a national programme. The government plans to put families at the heart of the reform, and intends to provide better support for all vulnerable children in order to reduce the need for crisis intervention. There will be pilots in 12 local authorities which will deliver more early support for families struggling with addiction, domestic abuse and poor mental health. There will also be more family-type placement for children in care with relatives, friends or foster families. Other changes include plans to recruit more foster carers, a simpler process and more support for relatives or friends who take on children, a rise in the leaving care allowance, and support for councils to recruit and retain more social workers. Economic, Constitutional and Social Policy Forum Politeia has published an article focusing on its views of the proposed changes to the school's history curriculum. The publication History, Whose History? The Battle for the School Curriculum features 3 historians' views on the proposals. The government's plan for reform came in response to recommendations from the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities. The plan for a new model history curriculum for pupils to see themselves as integral parts of what makes up the UK today was proposed. The essays included in the publication focusing on the responses of a variety of academics who all appear to conclude that there is no need for the proposed changes because diversity is already built in the current programme. Further details of the publication and forum for debate can be found on the Politeia website. Finally, a school principal in a rural part of Northern Ireland has expressed concerns over safety after it emerged that recruitment of lollipop men and women is being frozen. It comes as part of a drive to save money. The current power-sharing deadlock in Stormont meant no budget could be agreed and significant cuts needed to be made. The principal of a rural primary school, Donna Winters, told the BBC that until recently there had been consistent crossing patrol staff that have been vital in making sure pupils can cross roads safely, but that they have not had staff. The school has had to resort to employing a patrol staff member directly and, when they are absent, teaching and support staff have to fill in. Ms Winters went on to point out that safety was not an area where cuts should be made. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, it's Safer Internet Week, with the official day being on the 7th of Internet Centre focuses on want to talk about it, making space for conversation online. They've got loads of educational resources on the website saferinternet.org.uk, banded into 3 to 7, 7 to 11, 11 to 14, 14 to 18 years of age. They are even translated into Welsh and have adapted resources for SEND and ALD. So, they have pretty much covered all bases. You need to take up. But why do we need to get our young people talking about this? Well, let me try and give you an idea in one breath. With an estimated 5.16 billion people using the internet, at 64.4% of the world's population, it's estimated that around 500,000 predators pose a threat to young people daily, with the main target being 12 to 15-year-old children. With a quick search of statistics from the internet, I found supposedly 1 in 25 children will be manipulated in some way this year, and 80% of predatory behaviour will be through social media. This coupled with only 15% of parents actually knowing what their children are doing online makes this an issue which definitely needs to be talked about with our young people. To get some perspective on this, every 60 seconds TikTok users watch over 167 million videos. Data never sleeps. We need to know how to stay safe because the sheer volume of data means it cannot effectively be policed. Please, thoughts amongst the 575,000 other posts every 60 seconds on Twitter at TT Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
So that was the news. Fran, I'm going to pick up on a couple of bits there because obviously it feeds in almost perfectly to what we're talking about. And, forget kind of people's political views and forget what individuals think of the government and how they're handling things and how they're not handling things. We've got cost of living crisis. We've got them talking about revamping social care. We're talking about putting families at the heart of what they're doing. We're talking about vulnerable pupils and kind of almost putting them first. I mean, it begs the question, what have they been doing up until this point? If they've suddenly realised that those things need to happen and more money needs to go into those areas, what's been going on?
Oh, hello, I think I'm back. Can you hear me okay?
You are, yes, you're back.
Brilliant. So just what was that question again? Sorry, can you just repeat it?
Yeah, of course. I'm good at repeating myself. Ask my staff. They love it. They absolutely love it. Yeah, not a problem at all. I was just sort of picking up on the news and kind of thinking, the key phrases we've got and the key points from there were, talking about a cost of living crisis, which is affecting pretty much everyone in some shape or form. They're talking about revamping social care. They're talking about making sure that vulnerable pupils are put at the heart of everything and families are put at the heart of all those decisions they're making. And they're pumping, I think it said 200 million into revamping those, those areas, for want of a better word. So I suppose really my broad question is, what have they been doing up until this point if they've suddenly realised that those areas need a lot of money and a lot of focus, basically?
I mean, obviously focusing on the wrong things, maybe. It's I think definitely, if I'm just thinking back to the thing is with things like social care, and we mentioned before, we were talking about mental health and things like that. There's always been this pressure on the situation with CAMHS, for example, and the waiting list. And every time I kind of hear, I hear the CAMS waiting list and the different, like I say, I've worked in different boroughs as well. It's dreadful, and it is just getting worse. And I don't really know what's been going on. Maybe it's just maybe that focus on the wrong thing. It's scary. And actually, one of the kind of I would say that the biggest challenge that I see kind of linked to teaching at the moment and education is that, and again, this might be, we've mentioned COVID, but this kind of post-COVID social, emotional, this big kind of, this is the biggest thing that I'm finding kind of in my everyday today. Parents aren't really coming to me about the academic side of things. They're coming to talk to me about resilience and low self-esteem and those types of things. And it's become a really, I don't know, maybe because there's been a big kind of, the thing that I kind of always put it down to is COVID. That is the big thing that I kind of come back to, this kind of post-COVID social emotional, those issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because obviously I would assume that we work on opposite ends of the economic spectrum in terms of the kind of the family's background and the economic situation of those children that are coming into our schools. But it's the themes are there. They're inherent in probably every school, every age group across the country. That, like you said, the low self-esteem, the resilience, the emotional distress that some of our young people are in through no fault of their own. So it just baffles me, and it at times it frustrates me. I think if I thought it too much and didn't switch off, I'd probably never go to sleep, really. So yeah, I mean, I think COVID is obviously has been a big part of that, but I think I said this on the last show that we find, particularly where we are, that the community and the children in general are kind of a little bit more, I say grateful, if that's even the right word, but just kind of thankful that they can come into school every day. They know there's food available, it's warm. They know that staff are going to react in a consistent way. And that kind of feeds into the whole, nurturing element of schools, of kind of the PSHE curriculum that schools employ and the way in which they kind of deal with certain situations. I mean, it's funny. You mentioned some key services there. The one that really frightens me is the waiting list for mental health assessments, but not only that, just mental health support, both for adults, but more crucially for kind of our young people across the country. So these are really big, hard hitting issues that impact on what we deliver as PSHE, what we put our kind of time and efforts into as kind of practitioners in schools. Definitely. And the other thing that you brought up earlier was the fact that, you guys have got a school nurse. And I remember when I was at primary school, she was there all the time. She was talking to parents. She was helping kids, and you just don't have that anymore. The schools just don't have that facility to be able to rely on a school nurse. Even when I started teaching, we would outsource the RSE curriculum. It wasn't called that then. I think it was literally just called sex ed. But the school nurses would come in, and we'd be sat as teachers kind of. But now it is left solely to the schools to manage, and that's a real problem, isn't it? That's going to impact our young people, not just for this generation, but if things don't change quickly, probably for the next generation as well.
Definitely. And I think that having that expert there that you can go to, because my background isn't medical. My background is teaching, and even though I read a lot and kind of do try and keep up with what's in the news and those types of things, and I do go on courses, but actually, it's great to have that kind of the expert there to go and talk to as well. But actually, my kind of conversations that I have with other teacher friends is that actually with you mentioning before about kind of the different types of schools. So me being in an independent school, actually the issues are really, really similar. So when I with lots of different teachers that I've spoken to, be it in the Northwest, the Midlands, or kind of state schools in the Southeast, the lots of the problems that are very much the same. So yeah, but I definitely agree that with a good PSHE curriculum being taught by the right person and given enough time to it, because that can sometimes be the tricky bit, is that when you have those time constraints. But actually, I think when it is done well by the form tutor, the person that knows that child really, really well, then it can be really, really effective.
I mean, this is a tough one for you. Well, hopefully it's not too tough, but to kind of spark a bit more of a conversation, because obviously we're talking about how PSHE fits in the curriculum. If you kind of look at the subjects that you have, obviously, and that you're, the staff that you're responsible for in terms of not just your assistant head role in pastoral, but also PSHE lead, do you feel like there are more challenges teaching and delivering, I hate the phrase, I don't know how else to put it, high quality PSHE teaching compared to, say, maths or music or reading, for example? Do you feel like there are more barriers to success within the subject in your setting across the profession in general when it comes to delivering good PSHE lessons?
I think I don't think there is. So there is as much in my setting. I think the PSHE is delivered well. There's, like I say, we've had a kind of a big kind of push on PSHE with the kind of the training that we've offered to staff, and talking about it in insets. We've kind of given it quite a high profile in terms of we've spoken to parents about PSHE, in particular RSE. We actually do something quite nice in assembly now, where we have like a PSHE weekly celebration. And so it might be, so for example, last week it was somebody that has a good attitude to learning, and we celebrate somebody in each class for that. But also that's kind of given PSHE a status with our children, but also with our staff as well. But I do think in terms of other subjects, there's a lot out there for the other subjects as well. So if I just think about maths, there is so much out there to support the kind of the teaching of maths. And I think our kind of battle has been, not battle, but we've kind of looked at, we've said a lot that actually, PSHE is as important as everything else. It doesn't it isn't the one, we need to scrape back a little bit of time from somewhere. It's still so important. So yeah.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I always feel like it's quite a confident subject. If you're talking about professional sport, then it's you get those players that are confidence players, and if they're on a downer, then nothing happens for them. But if they're actually doing really well, then the world is their oyster. And I feel like that with PSHE, it's kind of like PSHE teaching is only as good as the connection that you have with, that you could argue the toss about any subject. As we said earlier, you've got in those professional relationships with those young people, and developing that kind of PSHE ethos in your class is kind of the most important thing, really. We're going to have a little message from one of our sponsors, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the positives in teaching this fabulous subject.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
Forward-thinking schools indeed, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about now, really, in terms of the positives because we've both expressed our love for the for the subject itself. We've talked about how we, or touched upon a little bit how we kind of like getting those professional relationships right with our young people, particularly in PSHE. What for you, whether that's in your setting or whether that's any kind of teaching education news that you pick up on kind of away from the classroom, what are the positives at the moment in kind of the delivery of PSHE?
I mean, kind of my positives with teaching it and for the pupils is that it just gives them so many answers that they might have about their lives and their futures, and it's just, I always find I find that I can connect really well with the pupils, and I get to know them a lot more, and that's why I really like teaching it. And actually, I know it means that they can also connect with other pupils as well. So you learn quite a lot about the child as the person. So it's not just in those kind of academic kind of more academic setting lessons. And again, it's so important to teach them about kind of coping skills, conflict resolution. I know something that my kind of session this week, with it being Children's Mental Health Week, we've been looking at the word connection. So obviously this year it's Let's Connect, but actually quite a few of our pupils are finding out about secondary schools. And so something we've had quite a lot of anxiety about secondary schools. So actually, I kind of spoke a lot about the positives of secondary schools and linking it up to something like we say that wasn't necessarily on the scheme for this week, but it fits so nicely. And I think I could definitely see, I spoke to a few of my pupils and said, how are you feeling about things now? And they definitely seemed better, and kind of said, no, I feel so much, I feel better. And actually, if you are following a scheme, that kind of, talking about the transition to secondary school comes up not till kind of the summer term, whereas actually for some of the pupils now, that is something that's really, really important. So yeah, it just gives them it opens up the possibilities about life. Like, I love talking about kind of careers and futures and aspirations. That's something it's so nice when they kind of, you hear about what they want to achieve. Which is, it's something that's really, really important. I love, like you said, about teaching about, we've spoken about role models already. So what you can bring more of that into PSHE as well, talking about role models, and that can be done across the curriculum as well. So yeah, there's so many positives to it. And like I say, I mentioned before about, I think having a really kind of good PSHE curriculum means that actually I always think that there is a link to kind of better achievement academically. That's kind of how I feel about PSHE. Are you there, Ben?
Hello, can you hear me?
Can hear you now.
I don't know if that was me or you. I'm not sure. I can't work it out. Anyway, we're back. After that absolute silence there, we're back. Where were we? We were talking about the positives,
yes.
weren't we?
Could you hear me talk about the positives?
No.
Oh,
I don't know if it was me or you, but
no.
we're back anyway.
You're
And I'm sure you gave probably the best answer you've given all evening, haven't you? And either I went or you went or something happened. But we're back live in the room.
Do you want me to say my positives again?
Yeah, go on. That'd be great. Just so I can hear it if no one else heard it.
Yeah, so I kind of said, it's a way to connect. It gives pupils the answers they may have to questions about their lives and their futures. And I mean, I always find that it's kind of it's a bonding session as well between the form tutor and the pupil. You can find out so much about the pupil from the actual from a PSHE lesson. I find out so much more than about a pupil than, you know, teaching maths or history or geography. And actually, and again, I've mentioned before, it's so important that there is that relationship between the person teaching PSHE and the pupil. And actually, you know, because we always say the form tutor is the person that knows the child really well. So be it, you know, there might be a pupil in your class that's going through certain family situations. That tends to be the person that knows about that. So yeah, and again, I find it really interesting. I find it good to talk about things such as, you know, coping skills, conflict resolution. I mentioned before about linking it up to secondary school. So something that I've been speaking about with my class recently is that transition to secondary school, and actually following a scheme. It does actually, it might not come up till kind of the summer term much later on, but actually it's questions that they're asking now that kind of open forum about that now, and giving them kind of scenarios. It's just the possibilities are endless with PSHE, and as I've said, you know, about having a really good quality PSHE PSHE lesson, having that kind of a good PSHE curriculum I always think will lead to a much better academic success.
I mean, it's one of those. I mean, there's got to be a better phrase. We're in 2020. Actually, you know, PSHE gives you so much opportunity to explore the personalities that you're dealing with day in, day out. But you're only going to be able to explore those if you've, you know, set boundaries and good professional relationship, you know, groundings with the pupils. So it's kind of one of those where you want the PSHE to be the best it can be, as you would if you were teaching, you know, modern foreign languages, if you were teaching geography, history, whatever it is. But actually, PSHE is one of those subjects, and probably the only subject that really allows you to fully explore the personalities and the kind of the, you know, without being dramatic, but the hopes and the fears of the pupils that you're teaching, because it gives them so many opportunities to share, either in a small group or one-on-one or publicly, you know, how they're feeling about things. And I think, again, you know, going back to that chicken and the egg scenario, is that actually if you embed those skills and you have those expectations, and, you know, people feel safe to kind of explore their emotions with you, it then becomes a situation where they're able to do that in other subjects as well. So, you know, I always feel like, you know, have that week or a couple of days at the start of a brand new academic year, we go, right, tell me about your pets and tell me about, you know, your household situation, stuff like that. Actually, you know, I think, and I'd like to hope that schools will now start to embark on more of a kind of a PSHE linked project, rather than going, right, we're going to get straight into place value in maths, or, you know, we're going to go straight into whatever, you know, literary subject that they're learning about. I know that obviously doesn't relate to the expectations of academic results, but for me, and I've always felt this, even as I was an NQT, but, you know, we'll call it ECT now for the modern crowd, is actually getting to know the children is just absolutely vital, and you can't move on and you can't get what you hope they will get in terms of academic progress and ability and confidence if you don't know them. So there's a lot to be said for, you know, really good grounding in terms of classroom behaviours with PSHE, but also how they're able to reflect on their own feelings, how they're able to reflect on other people's feelings, and how they kind of almost at any age kind of take responsibility for their own behaviours, really. So yeah, I think I completely agree with what you've said in terms of positives, and it's one of those subjects that I just love. There's a few subjects that I'm like, you know, to be blunt, I would always find a way to kind of leave them off a timetable. Oh, you know, we haven't got time for music today. oh well, maybe we'll do it in a couple very high. Even when I was, an early career teacher, to kind of develop those relationships with children, really. We talked a little bit earlier about, do we think that PSHE is valued enough? We know that there are expectations on kind of powers that be in terms of developing our children and kind of helping them out. But do you feel like, as a kind of an academic teaching nation, do you feel like PSHE is given enough at the moment?
I would say from our kind of from the setting that I work in, it is given enough. We've kind of put a lot of emphasis on PSHE. Like my kind of before the setting that I'm at now, I would definitely say it has there wasn't enough put on PSHE, and I do think that may be that may have changed slightly. It was interesting though. I was talking. I was actually talking to some friends recently about PSHE, and again, I do think that it is something. Quite a few people said to me, it's that subject that when you're on your PPA, your HLTA will do your PSHE, and I think it's the one that they see, that some people see as the easy one. But actually, I don't. It's that I actually wouldn't find it as an easier one, especially if you don't have that relationship or that connection. So that's something that it probably is very different in different schools, how it's perceived. We have given kind of a lot, like I say, we've looked at our timetabling. We've tried to give PSHE a little bit more compared to kind of other years. And what's happened with PSHE, and we kind of every morning we have like a form time, and we do say that that can be kind of whatever the form tutor, again giving that kind of trust to our teachers that actually you can use that in what you feel is needed. So if there is something. So I was having a conversation recently with a teacher, and we've been talking a lot about resilience, and we actually use something called Rise, which is actually really good. There's some great resources on there, but actually I said, try and feed that into your form time if you're finding that there isn't enough time for that in your PSHE sessions. It's fine to do that, but again, it's having that buy-in from teachers, given it enough time as well, being able to reflect. I think that's the biggest thing, and I know I've mentioned that already. Reflecting as practitioners is probably one of the best things we can do, and knowing our pupils really, really well. But it's interesting talking to different people in kind of the settings that they're in, and seeing kind of where PSHE lies for them, because I think it lies quite heavily for us. It is a really important subject, whereas, like I say, I do still think in some schools it is that subject that it can be missed, or the HLTA can cover that, or you just need to just look at the scheme and to kind of do the bare minimum for it. So yeah,
it's interesting you said about leaving it for an HLTA or for a potential cover teacher, because my mum is or was rather a supply teacher, and she said when she first started out, she would have a situation where one of the subjects she'd always go for would be Spanish or and the other one she said was PSHE. And as she went on through the years, she said that actually leaving her, I say leaving her, it sounds awful, doesn't it? But giving her PSHE to to teach. And I think that's a real positive, because that's the last subject that you want to lead to someone who doesn't have the relationship, right? And that's a real thing, because we all know the value of safeguarding, or the vital importance of safeguarding. Kind of DSL roles in school. I'm one myself, and I think you mentioned you were connected with safeguarding as well. But actually, some of the stuff that could come out of a PSHE lesson, if you leave it with an adult that doesn't know the children so well, let alone someone that isn't a regular to the school in terms of supply teaching. That's quite frightening, really. So I think it's really, really encouraging that, I say encouraging. She was a supply teacher in South Oxfordshire, but as we all know, schools don't have the budget for that anymore. But she's kind of in a situation where she doesn't know these children. She's been left with some sort of PSHE activity. But I think it's really, really encouraging that professionals now are not leaving that subject. It's always difficult to cover a class, we know, but actually, having that importance and saying, no, hold on a minute, this is something that I'm going to do as a class teacher is absolutely vital. Kind of moving on a little bit, really. We're kind of going with the times. We know it's Safer Internet Day today. Do you find in your school that you spend a significant chunk of time or even just a little bit of time on dealing with issues outside of school that have arisen from, I think TikTok was mentioned in the 2-minute tech review that we had on the show just now, but also, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all those kind of things. Do you find that the kind of the social media aspect of PSHE is kind of a prominent part of what you're doing in your setting, or is it something that hasn't really touched the sides at the moment?
No, definitely. It's interesting. Again, my kind of always teaching year 6 it's that kind of grey area, isn't it? When is it okay for a child to have a phone? Some of them have got phones, some of them haven't got phones. I was actually talking about this with my head teacher about kind of the social media and things that go on outside of school and how much input we should have. And again, it is all about education. We're very lucky. We have an ICT teacher, our computing teacher, and he will do a lot about internet safety with our children. But actually, again, we've said this already, but that it's almost trying to keep up with what else is going on. Because actually, I was talking with a friend of mine, and she was talking about Instagram, and actually I've noted this myself, that on certain kind of with things linked to Instagram, if you like something, then suggestions might come up. And then a friend of mine had said, my son's seen Andrew Tate, for example, on Instagram. He doesn't like him, but because he's liked something else, that's come up. And actually I'm like, that's crazy that happens. I didn't know that. So I was like kind of looking into that, and actually, then that's kind of portraying that and teaching that to the children. So again, like I say, things, I think it's a bit like with anything really in education, kind of little and often. That's kind of how I see it. Definitely kind of the being safe online, being safe on the internet. There's so much out there, and again, you don't want to scare them. That's something that I feel, and this is where, again, talking this week about secondary schools, lots of them, kind of the questions they have are lots about worries, and I'm like, we shouldn't, like, there will be, you do have worries, but let's talk about the exciting things as well. So it's trying to get that balance right. It's again kind of if small things do come up, so it's all about education and making them aware. If we feel it's needed, if there has been something been said, we will get involved if we feel it's needed. But again, we're quite good at talking to our parents and communicating with them. We have again kind of giving information to parents. It's something that I'd quite like to do a little bit more of, in terms of kind of parental workshops. And guiding parents as well, because especially in that upper key stage 2, there is a real grey area with phones and social media. I don't know what you find at your school with it.
Yeah, I mean, it honestly goes in cohorts. We've had situations in the past where actually it's been, I say horrendous. That again, that sounds a bit dramatic, but there's been stuff that's come out, and ultimately we've said to parents, look, you've got every right to go and speak to the authorities in terms of police with this, really, because it's happened outside of school. It's not happened on a device in school. So it's very, very difficult, pardon the pun, for us to police. So actually, these are your rights as a parent, as a citizen of the UK, and off you go, sort of thing. But we found that the more you talk about things, and the more that you are honest and you share experiences with with the children, you find that as they kind of progress through the school, they're kind of a lot more savvy, and they're the key thing is they know what to do in those situations. And of course, with our education on staying safe online, and that of course crosses over to kind of ICT lessons that they have as well. But it is a real danger. Example of that is I've got twins, and we kind of bit the bullet at Christmas and brought them these tablets like Amazon Fire thingy, about a game called Roblox. Now obviously I'd never heard of that so I had to do some serious research, and I was quite concerned that you could kind of talk to people, or people could communicate with you during the game. So we kind of instantly kind of blocked that out and explained to them, look, we're blocking this out because actually, although you're going to talk to your friends, there is an element where people can come in and talk to you. So there are always these dangers there, but I think it's quite interesting to see how professionals adapt to that element in their PSHE curriculum, and how those crossovers occur with kind of ICT and kind of the dangers that are inherent in using this stuff, really. And the other thing we do a lot of is parental engagement and kind of education. I'm not going to endorse anyone on this show, but there is some great stuff out there in terms of posters and leaflets that you can give to parents regularly about age ratings, because a lot of parents don't know about that, and kind of the expectations on what their children should and shouldn't do at their age. So that's always an interesting conversation to have, I think, from a parental point of view. We're going to have another message from our sponsors, and then we're going to kind of move to the final part of the show.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
So we talked a lot about PSHE. Obviously, the title of the show is PSHE Curriculum's Problem Child, which is, I was trying to be a bit kind of sensational with it, but we both kind of discussed the positives really, and I hope that people listening to this, the love that I have and obviously Fran has for the subject has kind of come through, because there's so many positives out there with PSHE, and working with the children to develop their own kind of emotional intelligence and understanding with how they perceive the world and kind of things that happen around them. But really what we're kind of agreed on is that it needs more money, it needs more time, it needs more focus from kind of the shot callers in education, really. And I think long term, the way that society is moving and the way that children are exposed to things either on purpose or accidentally in their life, that there needs to be better training, better kind of material to equip new teachers of the profession, but also to kind of constantly top up that CPD that experienced teachers kind of crave a lot of. And also ultimately, and it comes down to anything that we could talk about on any one of our fantastic shows on Teachers Talk Radio, about the money involved and where that money goes to in education. So there are a lot of positives. Of course, there are a lot of challenges, as there are with any aspect of education at the moment. But really kind of driving that and saying, this is what we want to see in our young people. This is how we want them to react to situations, to be able to ultimately cope with things in their life, really. So, that kind of wraps up that kind of segment, that main part of the show. I kind of, before you go, Fran, I just wanted to talk to you more generally about teaching, because obviously, in the past few weeks and months, there's been some fairly heated discussions you might have seen about education. But I just kind of wanted to get, your opinion on on where you're at of teaching at the moment and kind of how you're feeling. Like, what are the overall positives to what you do every day? What are the challenges? And ultimately, you said at the start of the show, you've been doing it for 10 years. Are you still enjoying what you're doing?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I'm really, really lucky in that I love my job. I think I still do really. I think I enjoy it as much as I do as when I started teaching. And I think kind of I was actually talking to somebody today about this, but I think kind of having variety in what you do. So actually, kind of my experience has always been teaching year 6, but I've always kind of had a little bit of a difference in what I'm doing. And like I say, I kind of always felt that I loved leading maths, and I have done so in 2 schools, but actually kind of moving away from that and moving kind of into the pastoral, the PSHE, the social emotional, that actually it's something that I've really really enjoyed. I mean, teaching in general, I think it's busy. Like we said, it's trying to stay kind of ahead of the game with lots of things, especially obviously we've mentioned that with our PSHE. I would say the biggest challenge, and I think I've mentioned this already, but definitely kind of the social emotional, that's kind of the thing that I have found has become more of a challenge over the years, over the last 10 years. But definitely what I've seen is parents are asking for support, which is great, that people they are asking for help and they're seeing it themselves, and that's something that I'm seeing more of. We're definitely seeing more of. I know it might not always be the case, but reflecting and talking to friends that are in teaching, that's something that they're seeing more of as well, that there is kind of more of a shout out from parents for schools to help support with children as well. So it's definitely busy, but yeah, I still do kind of thoroughly enjoy teaching and still love it.
I mean, that's great to hear. I'm 15 years into it, as I've said, and I still love it. I probably love it more than when I started, really. I don't have my own class, which is kind of a necessity in terms of what I do every day. But I guess I miss that connection with having 30 kids in a class and knowing them in a professional way and kind of knowing the ins and outs of them. Obviously now I have kind of oversight of a school, really, alongside the head teacher that we've got. But it's if you're in the right school, and I know Tom is listening to this, Tom Rogers, but he will always say that if you're in the right school, that's the best thing you can have, because actually the people you work with are so important. And you can work in the toughest schools, but if everyone is to use that phrase, on the right bus in the right seat, then it just makes everything so much easier and so much more enjoyable. I know that you have the awful job of of working with a good friend of mine, Jawad, who I hope he's listening. I hope he's listening. We were supposed to be playing football tonight, but I couldn't. So obviously, I was talking to you and doing the show. But I hope he's been listening. Last question for you, because I like to be nosy with my guests. What kind of stuff do you do away from teaching? Because we know it's a time-consuming job. We know it's we know it can be heavy at times. What stuff do you do to kind of switch off from what you do on a daily basis?
It's funny because actually, it's again, with it being Children's Mental Health Week, I've spoken a lot. It's always modelling and kind of showing the children that you're teaching that, when you're talking to them about, things that you can do to improve your mental health is have a hobby, go out. So it's something that I've kind of spoken about quite a lot this week. I did an assembly as well, kind of at the start of the week, and we spoke about this as well. But I love to go running. That's kind of one of the big things that I do to switch off, put some music on, go for a run, go out and walk my dog. I'm quite a social person.
Pets are massive in this, right?
No. It's actually something that when I actually spoke when we were talking about mental health. This was a few weeks ago with my class. Something I think most of them said actually spending time with my pet, being outdoors, spending time with my pet. And I said that is a complete same for me as well. So actually, yeah, spending time outdoors, spending time with my pet. But yeah, I'm quite a social person. So again, this week talking about connections in Children's Mental Health Week. Connecting with people, talking to people, spending time with people. It's so important. So yeah, I am a bit of a social butterfly, and I like to travel and I like to eat out. So all the nice things in life. So yeah, it is important. But yeah, it's something I've spoken a lot about with the children at my school this week.
And I think, you know what, that's so important that you do that. And for me, any teacher that is confident and happy to kind of share a part of themselves with their students, I think it's great. Obviously there's lines, you don't want to go over those lines, but in terms of the stuff you've talked about, I think that's absolutely fantastic. And kind of just showing them that actually it's not just, you do that job, but it's not you as a whole person. I think that's great. Being authentic and in the moment with pupils is such an important thing that you can do, particularly in this day and age. So yeah, that's great. Listen, Fran, thank you so much for joining me on the Twilight show today. I hope you've enjoyed it, or partly enjoyed it anyway, and you've got something out of it. But I really really appreciate your time, and hopefully in the future we can get you back on.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ben. No, it's really good, and it's great to be able to reflect on what I'm doing, what we're doing as a school as well, and reflect on PSHE. So no, thank you so much for inviting me on.
No problem at all, Fran, at all. We got a good number of shows coming up over the next couple of days. We've got, I'm trying to think, we've got Poppy Gibson. I think she's on Friday. We've got some other ones already done about behaviourism, which is quite interesting. We've got what else we got? We've got Ollie Mitchell later on tonight. Lucy's going to follow this with some spaces on Twitter. We've got Darren Lester on the early morning slot on Saturday as well. So there's an awful lot of stuff going on. And if you haven't checked it out yet, we've just started a brand new weekend review, which is on 10 a.m. on Sunday. And that's normally around sort of 4 or 5 of us come on and just talk about education stories of the week. So if you kind of want a bit of a roundup show, that's definitely the one for you. Could be one for you as well. Thank you so much for joining me. We're nearly there. If you're listening, we're almost there at half term. The kind of the weirdest half term, because we come straight out of Christmas. We have those sort of 4 or 5 weeks, and then we're kind of into the spring, second part of the spring term. So keep going. You're nearly there. Look after yourselves and enjoy the rest of your week. If you want to listen to this again, it will be on demand wherever you get your podcast from. But I have been your host, Ben Thomas, and this has been the Tuesday Twilight Show.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.